What is the philosophy behind the founding of the United States of America? Let's consider. Hello, philosophers. I'm Chico. Welcome to the Philosopher's Show, where we consider the greatest questions of human history. We hold these truths to be self-evident: that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. If you're familiar with the United States, then you probably have heard that already. But have you ever stopped and considered what that means? Because packed into that one sentence is a lot of stuff. Claims about the nature of truth, the existence of God, the metaphysics of human nature, the foundation of morality, and the purpose of government. It's not just a political slogan. It's a compressed philosophical argument. And every word is doing work that compresses through centuries of philosophy. With the upcoming 250th anniversary of the founding of the United States, I thought it would be good to go through this sentence and unpack the philosophy behind it. Let's start with the first few words: we hold these truths. Not we have decided, we prefer, or it is our opinion, but we hold. The language is deliberate. To hold a truth is to affirm something you've discovered, not something you've invented. Thomas Jefferson, who wrote this sentence, isn't saying, here's what we've agreed to believe. He's saying, here's what we've recognized to be the case. Now, this matters because it frames everything that follows as a claim about reality, not a claim about preferences. The Declaration isn't a social contract in the sense that a group of people got together and negotiated some terms. It's a proclamation that certain things are true, whether or not King George likes it. And the whole force of the document depends on this. If these were just preferences, then Britain could have easily just said, well, we have different preferences. But if these are truths, then Britain is objectively wrong and the revolution is justified. Then there's the phrase self-evident. Now, the philosophical tradition behind this, Jefferson is not reaching back at some kind of concept that something is self-evident if it is just obvious to everybody. That's not what that means. Instead, it should be a truth that once you understand the terms, you see that it has to be the case. The example from logic: the whole is always greater than the part. You don't need to conduct an experiment to verify that. Once you understand what the terms whole and part mean, you see that the proposition is necessarily true. Jefferson is claiming, and it's a bold claim, that the truths in this sentence have that status. They're not opinions, and they're not even the conclusion of arguments. They're starting points, and they're premises that are so fundamental that denying them would be incoherent. The concept of self-evident truth goes all the way back to Aristotle, who called them first principles. And he argued that demonstration, arguments that you give, must rest on first principles. You can't obviously go back indefinitely and keep arguing for this proposition and for the proposition that supports that, and for the proposition, eventually you have to get to some starting point. So these self-evident truths are undemonstrable. Aquinas actually picked that up and ran with it and applied it to moral truths. For example, good is to be done and pursued, and evil is to be avoided. He would say that that is self-evident insofar as it is grasped immediately by the intellect once the relevant terms are understood. Now, Jefferson probably wasn't thinking of Aquinas when he wrote that, but he had a long history of natural law that had been transmitted through European thought, ultimately probably going through John Locke. Now, all men are created equal, not born equal, which would be an empirical claim and a false one, because people are obviously born with different abilities, different circumstances, different capacities. The word created here signifies that this is a metaphysical claim about what human nature is like. It's not an empirical observation about what they happen to be like. So what kind of equality is this? Well, it's not an equality of talent, intelligence, or virtue. Jefferson obviously knew that people were different in those respects. The equality here that he's talking about is an equality of nature. Every human being, regardless of birth, rank, or circumstance, are all born with the same human nature. And that shared nature is the ground of equal rights. The idea has deep roots. The Stoics were probably the first to identify an equal human nature, and he based it on the rationality of humans. For the Stoics, every human being participates in the logos, the rational principle that governs the cosmos. Slave or emperor, Greek or barbarian, you share in the same rational nature, and that makes you fundamentally equal. Christianity took this even further. If every human being is made in the image of God, then human dignity isn't grounded in what you can do, but in what you are. A child without any understanding of the world versus the most intelligent philosopher there is. They both have the same fundamental worth, because their worth comes from their origin, not their performance. And the word created in this document is carrying that theological weight. Equality doesn't come from social agreement, it comes from the act of creation. Now, John Locke formalized this in political terms. In the second treatise of government, he argued that in the state of nature, all human beings are in a state of perfect freedom, and in a state of equality, wherein all the power and jurisdiction is reciprocal, no one having more than another. This equality isn't a reward for good behavior. It's a fact about what you are prior to any government, social contract, or human institution. So when Jefferson writes all men are created equal, he's compressing about 2,000 years of philosophical thought into 6 words. He's drawing on Stoic universalism, Christian theology, and Lockean political theory all at the same time. Now, endowed by their creator. This is the most philosophically loaded phrase in the entire set. Rights are not granted by government. They're not a product of social census. They're not earned. They are endowed by a creator. Jefferson is making a claim about the ontological status of rights. Where do the rights come from? Not from the state, because the whole point of this declaration is that the state could be wrong. Not from majority opinion, because the majority can be tyrannical. Not from tradition, because traditions can be unjust. Rights come from a source that transcends all human institutions, the creator. Now, you should know that Thomas Jefferson was not an Orthodox Christian. He was probably a deist. He admired the moral teachings of Jesus, but he didn't believe in the Trinity or miracles or anything like that. But he wanted to say that these rights must be unalienable. So if that's the case, you have to ground them in something higher than just human will. The moment you say that rights come from the government can take them away. The moment you say rights come from social consensus, the consensus could change. It's only if rights come from something beyond human authority that they are beyond reach. And that's not Jefferson's insight either. It's the logical structure of natural law theory that goes back through Aquinas. Aquinas argued that human law derived its authority from natural law, and natural law derives its authority from eternal law. And the eternal law is the rational plan by which God governs the universe. A human law that violates the natural law is not a law at all. It's an act of violence with the appearance of legality. The Declaration's logic follows exactly this structure. Britain's laws violated the natural laws that were given to us by the Creator, and therefore those laws have no binding force. Then the phrase certain unalienable rights. Now, of course, the question for modern man is, can we keep this without having the Creator? That's sort of the project of secular society. And I won't answer that question here, but it's definitely been a very difficult question to answer. Okay, certain unalienable rights. Unalienable. Not inalienable, although the terms are often used interchangeably. Unalienable means the rights cannot be given away or sold or transferred. They are built into what you are. You can't renounce your right to life the way you could renounce your right to a property, because your right to life isn't a possession. It's a feature of your nature. And again, this concept comes from natural law theory. In that tradition, certain rights are natural, meaning that they follow from nature, meaning the human nature, not nature like squirrels and acorns. They aren't legal fictions or social constructs. They're as real as your capacity for reasoning or your need for a community. You have them simply by virtue of being a human, and no government or society can take them away. A government can violate your natural rights, but it can't erase them. In fact, the violation is real precisely because the right is real. And also notice the word certain. Jefferson doesn't say all. So you could have certain rights that aren't unalienable, but we're talking about a certain set of them, amongst which, he says, are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, you're probably familiar with the fact that John Locke said life, liberty, and property, and Jefferson changed property to pursuit of happiness. Why is that? This has been debated endlessly, but I think the philosophical problem is more interesting than the political one. Property grounds rights in what you own. The pursuit of happiness grounds rights in what you are. And happiness here, by the way, doesn't mean pleasure or satisfaction. It's something much closer to the ancient idea of eudaimonia, living well, fulfilling your nature as a human being. Aristotle opened the Nicomachean Ethics by noting that every human action aims at some good. And by good, he means just something desirable. And that the highest good that we all aim at is what he calls eudaimonia. Now, this gets translated as happiness, but this isn't a feeling. It's an activity. The activity of living in accordance with virtue, which is to say in accordance with your nature as a rational being. A happy life, in Aristotle's sense, is a life that fulfills everything that you are. So when Jefferson writes pursuit of happiness, he's tapping into that tradition. The right isn't to happiness itself. No government can just give you happiness, but to the pursuit of it. The freedom to live your life in pursuit of genuine human flourishing without arbitrary interference from the state. And this is a deeply philosophical claim about the nature of government. Government doesn't exist to make you happy. It exists to protect the conditions under which you can pursue that happiness. The state creates the space, you do the living. And the standard of happiness is not subjective preference, it's human nature. There's a way human beings are supposed to live. And the job of government is to get out of the way so they can do it. Now, let's step back here to see what Jefferson has constructed. Because this sentence isn't just a list of claims. It's a logical chain, and each link depends upon the link before it. First, there exist truths that are self-evident, knowable by reason, not on authority or convention. One of these truths is that human beings are created equal. They share a common nature with equal dignity. The equality is grounded in creation. It comes from a source that transcends human institutions. Because of this created quality, human beings possess certain rights that can't be taken away. They are features of human nature not granted by the government. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which are the conditions of human flourishing. The purpose of government is to secure these rights. When a government systematically violates these rights, it loses its legitimacy, and the people have a right to abolish it. That's the argument. And notice what it requires. It requires a theory of truth, realism, that truths exist independent of what anybody thinks about them. It requires a metaphysics of human nature, that there is a shared human essence that grounds equality. It requires a creator, or at least philosophical theism. It requires a moral philosophy grounded in natural law, that some things are right or wrong by nature, not by convention. And it requires a political philosophy, that the legitimacy of a government depends on whether it serves its function or not. He packs all of that stuff in just 35 words. That's a lot. But with all that philosophy behind us now, the question comes, what about if we disagree with that philosophy? Can you keep the superstructure, the equality and all that kind of stuff, without keeping the foundation, the realism about truth and the creator and things like that? Jefferson's generation didn't have to answer that question. They inherited a world in which those philosophical commitments were broadly shared. We live in a world where they aren't. And the question of whether the conclusions can survive without the premises is still a live one. So let me leave you with that question. Can we continue without these philosophical commitments? Or do we need to hold on to them in order to hold on to our nation? Let me know what you think in the comments. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe, and happy 4th of July. Adios.